Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. This is going to look a little different because my first video got screwed up, so my piece of leather and all that's going to look a little different, but it's the same process. So I'm going to do this one over. So what we're going to do is we're going to engrave a piece of tooling leather. So we have a leather shop that's semi-local to us, and I just went and got a big roll of tooling leather. This is 3-4 ounce tooling leather. You can buy it in a whole side. You could buy a piece like this. And so I just bought a big piece and cut off what I needed. So we are going to get this on our mat, and then we're going to be able to engrave and foil, use the foil tool to engrave it a little bit further. So I'm going to show you how I do all that. So the first thing that I do is I get a piece of contact paper. You can use the Cricut transfer tape or any transfer tape, but this is just usually cheaper. This is just the Duck brand contact paper shelf liner that you buy in a big roll at Walmart. So you're going to just cut a piece that's going to be about the size of the piece of leather that you're using. And this piece of leather, like I said, is going to look a little bit different from the rest of the videos since I had to do a separate video. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this on our mat. This is going to serve two purposes. This is going to hold our leather onto our mat. And this is a pretty new strong grip mat, so we probably didn't need this to actually hold the leather on. But it's also going to keep our mat clean because, you know, leather gets all frayed and there's going to be bits and pieces of it. And that's going to, you know, shorten the life of your mat. So I always bring it down 2 inches and over 2 inches, or about, just because, you know, we use this part of our mat a lot and it gets less sticky. And you're also going to want to avoid your star wheels. So those white wheels that are on your machine, you're going to want to push all those white wheels to the side. So I put that, the plastic side down, paper side up, and then you're just going to remove the paper. So now this is, the sticky side is up. You're going to line up your piece of leather right over where you put this. This has got a little imperfection in it, but we're not going to worry about that for this video. So I then take a brayer. This is an inking brayer that, I don't even know what it's for, honestly. But it's like a little rolling pin. Cricut actually has one of their own, but you're just going to want to roll over it to make sure that that is attached to your mat really well. And so your contact paper is down, and then this is on top of it, so it's not going to go anywhere. So then after that, there it is. You're going to want to wet the leather. So you're going to want to take a sponge or this foam brush that I've got, something, and you're going to want to wet your leather. This is going to allow the engraving tool to engrave it better. I'm not a leather maker or a leather expert by any means. There's probably leather people out there that are cringing with my instruction, but this is just what I do. It doesn't mean that you can't do it a different way, but you just get it nice and wet. You want the the color of the leather to be pretty even all the way across. That just means that you got the leather, you know, about the same wetness all the way across. So this is a little bit shady here and there, but anyway, you're going to want to put enough on. You don't want to soak it, and you don't want it too dry. So you're going to want to darken the leather as even as possible, and then you're going to let that water, that the wet, soak into the leather, and that's just going to make this leather more pliable, and it's going to make the engraving have an easier time to, you know, press the indentions into the leather. So after you get a nice, you know, coat of water on it and got it pretty even, you're going to set this aside until this soaks into this leather. So you're going to want the color of the leather to lighten back up to its pretty much its original color. It's going to be a little darker because it's wet, but you don't want it to dry because that's defeating the purpose. You just want the liquid to soak into the leather, and then you're going to see a difference. You're going to see this lighten back up to this original color, which was this. So, I mean, you can see the difference since it's really wet. Once that soaks in a little bit, it's going to come back up to close to this color. So, I don't know. I don't even time it. Some people, I've heard 15, 20 minutes. It's usually longer than that before I get back to it. But just however long it's going to take for it to pretty much lighten back up to its original color is what we're going to want for this. So we're going to set this aside until it lightens back up and all that soaks in. So I wanted to go over real quick. So this is the engraving tool. We're going to be using the engraving tool. And this is only good for, or you can only use this in the Maker machines because of the gear top. So this is what we're going to be using first. That's going to be our first pass. And then we're going to be using the foiling tool. So I think I mentioned this in other slides, but I just wanted to go over now. You probably haven't heard that yet, but the foiling tool is only able to be used with the desktop app. So if you're going to create a project with a foiling, you know, any sort of foiling in your project, and you want to use the foil tool, you're not going to be able to do that in the mobile apps. You're going to only be able to do that in the desktop app. So the foiling tool can only be used on the desktop app to create your project, and the engraving tool can only be used with the Makers and not the Explore machines. So those are going to be, this is going to be our first pass. We're going to make a couple passes of this. I'll go over all that. And then you're going to want your either fine point blade or deep point blade. I also go over this a little bit later, but I use the deep cut blade just because the leather is on the thicker side. So I use the deep cut blade. So while the leather is wet and, you know, soaking in all that moisture, we're going to go over to Design Space and design the design that it's going to be engraving on the leather. An image that I created with the bees and the honeycomb. That's a little bit more of an advanced project, so I'm not going to go into how I created this, but whatever image you're going to use, you're going to want to get it on your canvas. Now, I will say a lot of people that do the engraving use the single line files, so single line images, single line fonts. You can filter fonts by writing fonts, and that's going to give you a single line font. There is some in Cricut Access also in the images that you can filter, so you can only get single line images. But this, since it's a regular image, when I change it to engrave, it's going to be an open path, and I'll explain a little bit what that means. But you could use a single line image. You can use an image like this. It just depends on the look you're going for. I don't have any problem with this kind of image, so I don't really focus on finding single line images. They're pretty hard to find. There are quite a few in the Cricut image library, but as far as, you know, anything to purchase online, they're kind of difficult to find. So this is just a regular image. So whatever image you want, you're going to get it on your canvas. So whatever image you want to engrave, that is. So this is representing my bracelet, or keychain, sorry, not bracelet, my keychain. So my material was 9 inches long, so I made it 8 inches, and then my keychains are 1 inch tall. So I added a square to my canvas, and then I resized it to 8 inches by 1 inch. And so this is going to be the cut layer. So what we want to do is we want to change this layer, our image, to an engrave layer. So you're going to go up to operations, and you're going to go down to engrave. Now see, I can turn my grid on so it's a little bit easier to see. But as you can see, you can see through these lines. So now it's what they call an open path. So it's going to engrave this line and it's going to engrave this line. If you had a single line honeycomb, it would just be one line, then one line and one line. So that's why a lot of people prefer the single line. This does take a little bit longer since it is engraving and foiling a little bit more of the image, of course, but that's just up to you. So we made this layer an engrave layer. We want one engrave layer, and then we're going to want to go up here and duplicate it. So now we're going to want this layer a foil layer. So you're going to go to foil, and the foil tool comes with 3 different points, a fine, a medium, and a bold. So just like markers, a fine point marker, medium, and then a bold marker, and I'm going to choose medium. It's going to turn it gold. That's just the default for foiling, but it's not going to matter because it's going to change. We're going to attach everything together, so it doesn't matter what color it is. So now we want to duplicate this 3 more times. So that's going to give us 4 foiling layers. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 foiling layers, an engrave layer, and now we want an extra cut layer. The setting that we're going to have to use makes 2 passes around your cut layer, and we want it to cut 4 times. So we're going to duplicate the rectangle. I'm going to stack it on top of each other and highlight both of them, go up to a line and center. So now this rectangle is going to cut twice, the bottom rectangle is going to cut twice, so really it's cutting 4 times. So after you've aligned it, you're going to go down to attach. You don't have to attach it right now, but that's just easiest to keep it separate. And then we're going to want to clean up the rest of this, so we're going to highlight all of it. We're going to go back up here to align and center. Now it put the bumblebees to the back. So if you want to put that to the back, arrange, send to back, and now you can see the bumblebees. So now we're going to want to make sure everything's highlighted again, and we're going to attach. So now everything that we've added here is attached together. So it's all going to stay together when we go to make it. So we have a foil layer, foil layer, foil layer, foil layer, 4 foil layers, an engrave layer, and 2 cut layers. They're all attached, and we're ready to go to make it. I wanted to point out that with the engrave tool, the Cricut Engrave tool, you can only use it with the makers. You cannot use it with the Explore machines because of the gear on the top that only the makers can use. So you're going to have to use that with a maker. And if you're going to use foiling on any of your projects, you're going to have to use the desktop Design Space app. You cannot use the foiling tool with the mobile apps. So for a foiling project, you're going to have to use the desktop app. And for the engraving tool, you're going to have to use a maker. So after you get it all attached, you're going to hit Make It. We're going to move this down because if you remember, I placed my material 2 inches down and 2 inches over. So you're going to get that where it's lined up with your material. And it's good there. We're going to hit continue. You're going to select your device. I have a bunch of machines. So if you only have one machine, there will only be one from that drop down, and you'll just choose your machine. And it's going to connect to your machine, hopefully. And then we're going to go to browse all material. And as I said, there's not very many compatible materials with the settings that we have in our project. So we're going to click the craft board setting. And then we're going to hit done. It's going to ask us to load our engrave tool. And then we're ready to insert our mat. Okay, so my leather is pretty dry. I can still see a little dark in areas, but that's going to be fine. You're going to want to move your star wheels all the way over to the side so they're not going to get on your leather. So if you're doing anything like a bigger design, you're going to want to keep it within 11 inches because you're not going to want these wheels to roll over your leather. So move them all out of the way. You're going to load your mat. have my Engrave tool loaded, and we are going to start it. Just checking to see that the Engrave tool is loaded. Engraving is done, and now it's asking for the foil blade. So you're not going to unload your mat. You're going to take the engraving tool out, and you're going to load your foiling tool. Okay, so the engraving is done. You're going to take out the engraving tool. You're going to insert the foiling tool. And oh, I guess I should go over the medium foiling point that you put in the tool has the 2 lines on it. So it has a heavy tool or a bold tool and a fine tool. The fine tool has the 1 line. The bold tool has 3 lines. So the medium is the one that we're using, and it has 2 lines. That's how you can differentiate which one you're using. So we're using the one with the 2. If it'll focus. Nope. Oh, there we go. 2. So you're just going to load it like normal, and then you're going to start the process. You never unload your mat until it's through with everything, through cutting, and cutting is the last step. So after it's done foiling, it's going to ask you to insert the blade, and we'll do that next. Foiling has stopped, and now it's asking us to insert the blade. So now we've completely finished all of the tooling work, and we're just going to cut out the keychain. So if you look over here on the left where it says remove used gold foil, and it said to add the foil to it before, we're ignoring that part because we're not actually foiling again. We're just using the foil tool. So you're going to ignore this. I didn't mention that on previous slides, but just ignore about the foil, because all we're doing is using the foiling tool, which is going to be shown in this part of the screen. So now we're going to go over and we're going to take out the foiling tool, and we're going to put in the blade. Okay, so the foil tool has completed its job. It's done. We're going to take out the foil tool. We're going to put in our deep cut blade, and then we're just going to start. And it's going to just cut out the rectangle. It's going to cut it 4 times because remember the craft board setting cuts it twice already, and we duplicated the keychain. So that's going to be cut twice, 2 times. So that's going to be cut 4 times. So it's going to cut 4 times, and then we're going to hopefully be able to take it off the mat and not have to cut any of it. Sometimes some hangs up. I am noticing that my blade might be getting a little bit dull, and so you might have to kind of tear it apart. So while I'm on that subject and it's cutting, since this is going to be pretty quick, if it does hang up and you're going to have to cut it, or sometimes you can just kind of pull it apart, but you're left with all the little pieces on the edge of the leather that stick out, kind of like if you were to, you know, pull apart fabric, you're going to have little threads. You can just take a little lighter and just quickly go around the edges of it, and it's going to just get rid of those, I guess, those little pieces of the leather. So I'm going to unload this, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to see how it did. Okay, so I've unloaded it out of my machine, and we're going to take it off the mat and see how it did. Actually, I'm going to leave that because I don't think it cut. So it did pretty good. I'm still going to have to pull it a little bit, and that's where I get the little frayed edges, so I'll show you. But, I mean, it did pretty good. So if you can see these top little edges that are frayed just a slight bit. I don't even know if y'all can see that, but if you can, let me grab a lighter. So I just have these little lighters that I keep in my craft room. So all you're going to do it from behind. Don't do it from the top. And just swipe over it. If any of you have made faux leather earrings or faux leather anything, you're probably going to have, well, or leather actually. Leather does this a little bit worse than faux leather. So it's just going to clean up those edges, you know, just so you get a more of a, you know, a slick edge and you don't have all those little pieces. I didn't get it perfect, but anyway, you get the idea if you just run across it. You can take some of the thin sandpaper. I'm not even sure what grit this is, probably 150, 200 something, and you can kind of lightly go over it and take those off too if you don't want to use the lighter method, and clean it up. But it did pretty well. So what this is going to, after I'm done with it, it's going to be a key ring that's going to be like this, and it's going to have the hardware up at the top. So now what I'm going to do is I have it's called Leather Sheen. It's Fiebing is the brand. And so what this is going to do is this is going to provide their, well, it's going to provide a resist is what they call it in leatherworking, where it's going to put a coat on this. So when I use my gel antiquing, which is this, Fiebing's also, it's an antiquing gel. So when you spray it first with this, it's going to seal your leather. So the gel isn't going to penetrate the actual leather. It's just going to get down into all those grooves, and you're going to be able to wipe it off, and it's not going to stain the bulk of your leather. It's just going to settle into those little cracks and crevices where your design is, and then I'm going to be able to wipe it off because this is going to seal the leather and not let the gel penetrate it. So we'll do a couple coats of this, and then we're going to let it dry for about an hour. And after it dries, then we're going to be able to stain it. So I'll come back when I get ready to stain after I put on a couple coats of the Leather Sheen for the resist. So again, you're just going to do 2 light coats or a few, whatever you'd like, and then let it dry for an hour. Okay, so it is time to antique our leather piece. So this is the leather that we engraved and used the foil tool on. So I have sprayed the Leather Sheen on there for to seal the leather so the gel doesn't penetrate the leather, just goes into the creases like I said before. So this is, I use this for what's called a resist, so it's not going to sink into the leather. So I sprayed that a couple light coats, and then I've let it dry. Oh, it's been a little bit over an hour. So what I do with the gel is I just use my gloved finger because I can get down in all the grooves. You can use a wool dauber, you can use a wool sheet, you could use a paper towel if you wanted. I just find that it's easier with my finger. So all I'm going to do is just put a little bit on my finger, just like that. And then we're going to just go over the entire thing with the gel, making sure you're going to get it into all those grooves. If you need more, get more. But this usually, that amount will usually do if you're going to just work it in real good. I also do the backs and the sides. So I just take the little bit of extra and just rub it on the sides. Just make sure you get it so there's no that bare leather showing. And the back usually takes a little bit more. You don't have to do the backs. You can leave them as is. You could add something to the backs of them, like HTV or, you know, whatever if you wanted to. I just go ahead and make the same color as the front, so it's kind of, oh, got that everywhere. so it kind of matches. So just rub it in pretty good. So I'm going to turn back over to this side, and now we're just going to wipe this off. Every leather is different. Depends on the oil on your hands, if you've gotten it on there. I can see that it looks a little bit darker in this area. I mean, that just kind of gives it character, I think. But what you're going to want to do is just get it off the top, just so it is into all those little grooves and not so much on the top. Did kind of sink into that. And another reason why it might sink in a little bit more in some places is you didn't get a good solid even coat of the leather sheen or whatever you're using for your resist in some areas. So, you know, there's a possibility that it's gonna sink into those areas a little bit more than others. If you haven't, I see some places over here where I didn't get it real good, so I'm gonna go back over it and just make sure that I get all that down in those little crevices. And if you want to use like a sponge brush or something like that, if you feel like you can get down in the little crevices a little bit better with a sponge brush, then, you know, by all means use that. Use whatever you're comfortable with. Just make sure you get it down in there really good. And then you're just going to wipe it off. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Got down in there a little bit more. And after this dries, I kind of come in with a clean piece of cotton. And you're just going to go over it and like go in circles. That one's been used. Go more in circles. So you're more buffing it. You can do that with the top coat also. So just come in and just kind of buff it. Sometimes easier said than done. So anyway, that is about the finished piece. It did get darker in this little area. I must not got the resist on there good enough. But like I said, it's character in the final piece, I feel. So here's a really light with it down in the crevices. And then you have a little bit of a dark spot in that area, but you have some over here, a little bit in those B's too. So anyway, just make sure that you get your resist an even coat if you don't like that. And maybe, you know, do more 4 or 5 light coats on it with your resist, whatever you're using for your resist, so you're not going to get some of it going into the leather more places than others, because that's usually what's going to cause something like that. So that's the finished piece. So after this dries really well, usually about 24 hours, I'm going to go back over it with the leather sheen and just give it a final coat, and that's going to make it water resistant, and it's just going to seal in that gel, so it's not going to go anywhere if it scrapes across your keys or anything like that. And then I'll add the hardware, and then I'll come back and show y'all the finished product probably tomorrow after I get it all finished. So I think it looks pretty good. And the sides are all stained. I need to finish the back a little bit more. I didn't get it real good in places, but you don't have to do the sides or the back like I said, but this is going to be folded over like this with hardware on it. So I wanted to make sure that I did the inside and the edges also. So anyway, there it is. So I just wanted to show you guys the finished product. That's the bee keychain we were working on. Has its hardware and it's ready to go. I think it came out pretty good. And here's a few others. I have a Jeep one with the tire tracks that I did. And then this is more of the key fob style. And that's the finished product. I wanted to also say that I'm by no means a leather worker. I don't do any leather work. I've made faux leather earrings in the past and such, but I know that leather workers use a lot different stuff probably than I do. The resist that I use, a lot of people use a resist called tan coat, and not the finished top coat that I use. Somebody suggested that to me. That's what I started using because it's also the top coat. And so you can just use the same thing for two different reasons. So I use that as my resist, but I know that a lot of people are probably, falling over in their chairs when I'm telling y'all what to use. But that's what works for me. By no means that's the only way to do it or the right way to do it. Those are just my suggestions. And like I said, it's what works for me.